Good afternoon. This is Leah Thill, the Director of Sustainability with MACOG. This is a re-record of our pre-RFP CFI meeting held on August 7th, 2024. Unfortunately, although the meeting was recorded within the Zoom interface, we did not realize that an external party had initiated that recording and it was not one of our staff members. Therefore, we did not have control over obtaining the recording, and we were unable to identify who within the meeting recorded it to provide the original version. We hope that this re-record will provide you with the information that fills out most of your understanding of the grant and our intended procurement strategy. If there are any remaining questions, we will hold a follow-up meeting to distributing this recording that will allow for any further clarifications. MACOG is the Michiana Area Council of Governments. The project location includes the 4 counties in northern Indiana: St. Joseph, Elkhart, Marshall, and Kosciuszko, as shown on the map outlined on this slide. We cover 4 counties and 35 cities and towns. And notably, there are 3 alternative fuel corridors that now run through the MACOG region: the I-80 Indiana Toll Road, east-west from Ohio to Illinois, US 31, which connects us to points south, and US 30 between Fort Wayne and Northwest Indiana. We are a regional planning organization and a voluntary association of local governments. MACOG's CFI project goals for our regional charging and fueling infrastructure grant are to fill in gaps in EV infrastructure, primarily targeting rural and disadvantaged communities. And notably, we're targeting areas where EV infrastructure and adoption are currently low, not where there is a high probability of high utilization, because our strategy is to invest beyond where the private market is supporting EV charging in order to make a difference. Our goals are to have reliable, accessible stations that promote safety for both vehicles and pedestrians. The Regional Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Grant is going to be split into 2 different components for Level 2 and Level 3 EVSE implementation. MACOG will oversee the installation, operations, and maintenance of approximately 32 Level 2 EVSE. 14 of these would be rural, and an estimated 18 would be in urban and disadvantaged areas. Separately, MACOG will award funding for the installation, operation, and maintenance of 3 Level 3 EV stations, 2 on US 30 and 1 at the South Bend International Airport. You will note that MACOG will have more of a operational role, ownership role, and implementing the Level 2 projects, whereas we have less of that role and will delegate more of those responsibilities to awardees under the Level 3 procurement strategy. There are 35 total proposed sites. This map shows those sites that were included in our grant application as initially proposed. In green, those are public sites. Those public sites are essentially pre-selected, and we can dedicate funding to those sites because they are public as subrecipients. Any of the orange dots, those are private entities, either nonprofits or for-profit. There's no distinction there. Any private entity will have to recompete through a competitive application forthcoming this fall in order to be selected for the remaining sites. However, we did make an effort to target our outreach to nonprofits or other organizations that serve disadvantaged communities or are located in key target areas, but we need to make the opportunity more broadly available to the general public through a competitive process. The blue dots, the 3 of those there, are the 3 Level 3 sites that I mentioned. Here's how our procurement phase will proceed for Level 3 projects. There are 3, again, 2 on US 30, 1 near Plymouth and 1 near Warsaw, and additionally 1 near the South Bend International Airport. You'll note if you look at our application that we intended initially to have South Bend's, the SBN have more of a ownership and operational role in that charging station. However, they have decided to align that operational strategy, be more similar with the US 30 projects, enabling us to award potentially all 3 of those sites to a single entity or 2 to a single entity and have those function more similar to the US 30 sites. As shown here, the 2 US 30 sites will need to be NEVI compliant. They will be need to be within a mile threshold of US 30. However, the South Bend International Airport will be greater than a mile away from US 31. We know that, and we've intentionally chosen that. Our grant is under the community program under CFI, not the corridor program, so we don't have to make that NEVI compliant, but our intent is that the US 30 projects will help with the NEVI build out of US 30. This is what level 3 station design will look like in alignment with NEVI standards. We know that under the community program, again, we could have a lower KW, we could mix level 2 and level 3, but we're going to choose to provide at least 4 cars simultaneously charging at 150. ADA accessible as shown here. There's the ADA access aisle and the larger van accessible parking space on one of these, as well as the bump out for ADA accessibility. It's okay to include NACS, North American Charging Standards, and CHAdeMO plugs in addition to the 4 CCS plugs that are required. We will also, in alignment with the federal minimum standards, require EVITP certification and the use of registered apprentices. For more on ADA station design, see the link at the bottom of this slide through the access board. Our CFI goals for the RFP are to solicit applications for 1 or more eligible entities to provide the build out of the 3 CFI funded level 3 stations. Again, 1 near City of Warsaw, 1 near City of Plymouth on US 30, and 1 at the South Bend International Airport facility. Note the distinction here between the 2. Again, US 30 will be NEVI compliant. South Bend International Airport will not, because it is not located close enough to US 31. The difference here in how these stations will be implemented is that the airport will require negotiating a lease arrangement and revenue sharing agreement because of some federal guidelines and rules that they need to follow in using airport property. It's not always typical that site hosts would be paid rent essentially for leasing the property for charging stations. They bring their own value in the business case for attracting people to a particular location, but in this case, there will need to be that revenue sharing and lease arrangement negotiated after the notice of selection and prior to executing final contracts. Here's a closer look at the South Bend International Airport proposed location. There's a new car wash facility, not open to the public, but for the rental car companies that operate out of SBN. It's located just south of the main terminal, near the main entrance to the airport, just off of US 20 Business or Lincoln Way West. And shown on the bottom picture is a close-up of, in that red rectangle, where the charging stations will be located. And then you see below that the SBN car wash under construction. The location for the charging station will be just north of that, just outside of the fenced-in area, so it is accessible to the public. But then you have the built-in utilization of the car rental companies using it, people that are just coming off of US 31 from Lincoln Way West, and the community accessing it very easily without going further into the airport property. But then you have people coming and going for ride share, dropping people off at the airport, etc. That will also be able to utilize this station conveniently. One of the reasons we did not place this, say, closer to the main terminal entrance is that CFI rules prohibit paying a fee for parking, and parking here is all paid parking, and so we wouldn't have been able to locate it any closer to the main terminal. Notably here, in addition to the airport, there's also a train, the South Shore Line, that operates out of the airport facility as well. That attracts more folks for higher utilization here. Looking at Plymouth, so we have selected our preferred corridor to locate the charging station near the City of Plymouth within 1 mile of US 30. That would be between Pioneer Drive in the west to 9A or King Road to the east. This allows for placing the station in pretty much most of the City of Plymouth to meet that 1 mile threshold. But our preference is not to have this placed, in an isolated area some distance from the City of Plymouth or outside of our region on US 30 to the west. We would like to have it as close as possible to the City of Plymouth. Next location, City of Warsaw, within 1 mile of US 30 from North 200 West. In the west to Indiana State Road 13 near Pearston to the east. Again, this provides broad flexibility in locating the station in many of the commercial or downtown areas within City of Warsaw. Here's a schematic showing how we anticipate the rollout of level 3 DCFC procurement. MACOG will issue an RFP for 3 level 3 sites altogether, and the application will propose specific sites as well as securing site host support. So respondents will be responsible for bringing specific project locations within those preferred corridor areas that I mentioned for US 30. MACOG will select a prime to contract with, who will then select subcontractors for the station design, installation, etc., following federal rules for procurement. MACOG will then award funding to the prime not to exceed 80% or the available award amount, which will be negotiated and determined based on the estimated project costs. And the prime recipient will be required to provide at least 20% match based on the rules for the CFI program. And then the recipient will be responsible on an ongoing basis for the operations and maintenance and reporting to MACOG. Deadlines for implementing both level 2 and 3 projects. We will be hosting a pre-RFP meeting here in the next couple of weeks after posting a draft RFP, and in early to mid-October, we'll probably actually push that back a little bit into November, but ultimately having contracts and site host agreements signed within December. Just as a reference for what was included in our grant application, our budget is $1.1 million per level 3 station. So if you do the math there, for 80%, that is somewhere around $880,000 per station. But again, based on project costs and site-specific considerations, there might be a larger award for one of the locations and smaller awards for the other. So we'll make that determination based on the information that respondents submit. Second procurement phase will be for level 2 projects. For these projects, there are a couple that are being shifted into a phase 2 because of planned park improvements, planned new construction for an apartment building that it makes sense to include charging. So because of the timing of those projects, we wanted to allow for a second phase of level 2 build out. The first phase will have the majority of the projects in 2025. So these will be, procurement will be in early 2025 and they will need to be installed by the end of the year. Phase 2 will be 2026 to 2027 for those projects that need a little bit more lead time. We have made some adjustments to what the table here that was submitted as part of our grant application. We've added the public library in North Webster and swapped out town of Middlebury, and we have potentially an open spot for New Carlisle unless we move that into phase 2. That could be filled with another community that's not listed on the public sites. And then some of these sites are in, again, private property, and they will need to be recompeted anyway. So this is not in any way a final list, but just gives an idea of the range of communities, small towns, and cities where these level 2 projects were proposed. Again, here's another map showing the geographic distribution. We have good regional coverage on a number of our towns where there's not currently any charging available, or at least safe, accessible, walkable charging that serves multiple destinations. This is how we anticipate the RFP process working for level 2 projects. It's different from level 3 because level 3, we are again delegating a lot of the responsibilities to the awardee, whereas MACOG will take a very involved role in each step of implementing the level 2 projects. First, we'll have a site host application this fall and get federal highway approval and amend our grant agreement for new sites that include any substitutions for the public sites as well as private sites. Then we'll issue an RFP for preliminary design and engineering in order to get the appropriate environmental approvals so that we can add construction money to our grant agreement and provide a notice to proceed and contract for that, which we cannot do without completing that step for environmental. Then that also prepares us for actually bidding out the construction of the projects. We anticipate splitting the hardware, software, and construction into separate procurements so that MACOG has more control over the selection of the specific level 2 products. That could change, but we anticipate that being separate at this time. And then for the RFP for construction, MACOG would issue that as well. We would repeat these steps again for phase 2 in 2026 or 2027, depending on the number of sites that we end up selecting for phase 1. once we get in all applications here this fall, if there's an overwhelming response and we feel like the applications are meeting all of our goals for the program for equity, we could decide to just do one phase. But right now we just have the information in front of us of those potential site hosts that have expressed interest in level 2 charging. But phase 2 anticipated to be only 11 sites out of the 32. Here's a quick look at our implementation deadlines for both level 2 and level 3. Notably, level 3 achieving substantial completion by the end of June 2027. But again, do propose what seems most achievable based on industry trends. We're aware of tritium bankruptcy and uncertainty around NACS, and as well as just lead times for transformers. And so we'd like to see what timelines seem appropriate, and we could modify the substantial completion deadline somewhat, noting that the budget period end date currently is the end of 2027. Level 2 substantial completion, as I mentioned before, would be the end of 2025. That's all I have to share. My email address for questions between now and when the RFP is released is lphil@macog.com. Once the RFP is released in final form, all questions will be directed to our MACOG, dir@macog.com, our director email, rather than myself. I will not be entertaining questions after our final RFP has hit the streets. So I hope this re-recording was helpful. We will distribute a list of the questions and written responses that came up during the original session, in the hopes that that will help fill in for those that weren't able to attend to get the same information. Look forward to seeing all the responses and next meeting with you all in a couple weeks. Take care.